Cantatibus Organis, Cantatibus Organis, Cantatibus Organis,
Hello and welcome to our 7th International Women's Encounter here at Magdala in Galilee in the Holy Land. And today we are finishing our weekend encounter experience with a beautiful conference on hospitality. This keynote talk is given by Dr. Mary Schwartz, and we are blessed to have her with us today to share her expertise in this topic. I think this is very timely at this moment because, as we all know, we're living very special times where we need something that will bring us together as people, as humanity, and where we are not focused on the differences that separate us, but at what unites us. In this case, the hospitality of a woman's heart can reach out and embrace all and bring them together. And we are, as I said, very blessed to have with us Dr. Mary Schwartz, who was born and raised in Rhode Island in the United States of America. She is the youngest of 4 children who grew up in a very loving Catholic family. She studied English at Grove City College in Pennsylvania and earned a Master's of Philosophy from the Franciscan University of Steubenville. In the Jubilee year of 2000, she felt the call and followed the call of the Lord to consecrate her life to Him in Regnum Christi on the feast of Christ the King. So after 20 years and some months, we can look back on this time as a time of great blessing. Her years of ministry have focused especially on spiritual direction, formation for college students and young adults. And she recently completed her doctoral studies in philosophy at the University of Dallas, where she wrote her thesis on the topic of Metaphysics of Hospitality. She has a passion for prayer, evangelization, coffee, biking, and spending quality time with new and old friends. A special tidbit of information about Mary is that her grandfather was professor of philosophy in Germany, and with the rise of the Nazi group in Germany, he had to flee the country and travel to the United States, where he became a professor of philosophy. So did his son, Mary's dad, and now Mary also. So what's really beautiful is about his story, before he left Germany, he was actually teaching alongside Edith Stein. And this was a beautiful friendship. And even when Mary's dad was born there in Germany, Edith Stein got to hold him in her beautiful, loving, maternal arms. And he has always considered that as a very special blessing for him and for his family now, and for Mary. So without any more ado, I present to you Dr. Mary Schwartz, and enjoy this beautiful philosophical basis for the metaphysics of hospitality, and applied in this case of ours today to the heart of the woman.
Thank you very much, Celine, for that introduction. And it's an honor to be here to speak on this beautiful topic of hospitality and also the heart of the woman. So I'm going to share with you some of the the research and just the reflections that I've had in this theme. So, according to Henry Nouwen, there is no deeper human darkness than the darkness of not feeling truly welcome in human existence. This is because the human person is a being made for love and the gift of self. And I really love this quote because I think that it rings true to all of us. The deepest anguish of the human heart is to not feel welcomed into this world, to feel rejected or unwanted or unloved. When the other children were playing a game and chose teams and you were the last one to be picked, you probably felt sad if that ever happened to you. In our deepest core, we each deeply desire to be known, accepted, welcomed, and connected to others. When we feel excluded and forgotten, we suffer profoundly. Saint Mother Teresa expressed this well when she said, "Loneliness and the feeling of being unwanted is the most terrible poverty." And that's a big statement coming from Mother Teresa, who saw a lot of poverty, as we know. Yet she says that the deepest and greatest poverty is this, to feel unwanted, unloved. And this is why she was a saint, and her example moved us. It moved people all over the world because they saw in her this example of really the love of God. She saw in every single person, no matter their skin color, their religion, if they had a contagious disease, if they were deformed, if their life wasn't morally good, it didn't matter to her because each one was a child of God and made in his image, and they deserved love. So I would say that Mother Teresa lived what I am going to speak about, this phrase, the metaphysics of hospitality. So since this phrase is in the title of my talk, the metaphysics of hospitality, I want to mention it, even though it may at first have this kind of big philosophical sound to it. I wouldn't want anyone to feel like it is too abstract. So I want to try to explain what it means because it's really something beautiful and I think universal that we can all relate to. So at first you might kind of wonder why these words go together, metaphysics and hospitality. So if you have heard of the word metaphysics, you probably think of something very abstract and obtuse. It's a word from philosophy. And then the term hospitality, on the other hand, would make us think of maybe a warm cottage where someone is, very friendly and they welcome you and give you a meal and this kind of welcoming home. So what do hospitality and metaphysics have to do with one another? You may be wondering. So metaphysics is simply a fancy word for the study of being, and philosophers study the deepest questions of life. So kind of like, why are we here? What's the meaning of our existence? And so this area, metaphysics, basically just tries to understand the most fundamental level of our being, of our existence. The French philosopher, he's a personalist philosopher who's focused a lot on understanding the human person. Gabriel Marcel, he lived from 1889 to 1973, so 20th century, and he coined this phrase, metaphysics of hospitality, in his writings. And it simply has to do with a kind of hospitality or welcoming of the other person that is so deep, it is on the level of the being of the person. In other words, there's countless examples of hospitality where I could be offered a room to stay in or a good meal or even a simple smile. And these are all examples of hospitality, and they're all good things. But the metaphysics of hospitality is a more profound hospitality, having to do with being welcomed and cared for, not just with these external acts or these external manifestations of hospitality, but it's actually an attitude or a disposition of the heart, an attitude of reverence and welcoming toward the other person. So it has to do with the being of who I am, of who you are. Another philosopher, 20th century philosopher, Joseph Pieper, said, to love another person is to say to that person, it is good that you exist. It is good that you are in this world. In other words, you are wanted and welcome in your very existence. This is the love that God has for us. He has created each one of us in his image. And as it says in the book of Genesis, after he created the human person, he not only said it is good, like he said about the rest of creation, but he said it is very good. We are very good. And this is because we are made in his image. God looks at each one of us and says, I love you, you are mine, and you are good. And we live in a world that tells us a lot of other messages, whether it's through the media or even just the pressure that people put on themselves, all of us. And the messages that we hear are things like, you are not good, you're not good enough, you aren't as good as others, you aren't lovable, you aren't worthy, you don't have what it takes. These false messages that we can hear in our thoughts are from the evil one, the father of lies. But God tells us, you are good, and I love you for who you are, because you are you. And in the world we live in, it doesn't always help us to remember that our identity is good, that we are made good by God, and we are loved by him. The world often tells us that our worth is dependent on our level of success, either socially or financially or in our career. And so we often feel like we need to earn the love and approval of others. Marcel calls this experience of alienation and loneliness in our times, he calls it the broken world. And I think we can all agree that the world we live in is broken. It has a lot of beauty in it, but there's also brokenness. And how did the world get so broken? Well, according to the Judeo-Christian tradition, we'd say it goes back to the fall in the Garden of Eden, where original sin entered the world. But I don't think we need divine revelation to believe in this doctrine of original sin. And we don't really need any extra evidence other than what we hear on the news or what we experience with so much violence and wars in the world. Even all that sadly is happening in the Holy Land in Israel and Palestine right now. We also feel the world's brokenness in our everyday lives when we suffer, and we see there's just so much imperfection. I remember when I was a young girl, my father, who is a wise philosopher, wise man, good man. And I remember, I don't know what I was complaining about, but he said, Mary, we live in an imperfect world. And I'll always remember that, because sometimes we just wish it were perfect, and that's heaven. But this world is broken. And Marcel thinks that the experience of brokenness is something we all have as human beings. We see it. He said there's kind of three levels. First, within each human person, there's a kind of brokenness. We feel loneliness and angst and despair. And then there's also brokenness in relationships among people, between men and women, between families, between countries. And then thirdly, this brokenness is even toward the world, but ultimately towards God. There's a break. But we know that this brokenness has been healed. We believe this through our faith that God has redeemed and brought healing. Marcel also described this brokenness in a play. He wrote a play besides philosophy. He also wrote some drama. And he has one of his characters describe, she was having difficulty in her marriage and in relationships, this character in the play. The play is called The Broken World. And her name is Christiane. And she says to a friend, she says, don't you feel sometimes that we are living, if you can even call it living, in a broken world? Yes, broken like a broken watch. The mainspring has stopped working. Just look at it. Nothing has changed. Everything is in place. But put the watch to your ear and you don't hear any ticking. You know what I'm talking about, the world. It seems to me it must have had a heart at one time, but today you would say the heart had stopped beating. Like this broken watch that has no tick, it seems our world has lost its heart in many senses. And Marcel is describing the people of today that live in the broken world as many people live, but they don't really live. They're not truly alive. And one of the main contributors to this broken world is that we live in a very technological society, and we are losing more and more a sense of mystery, of the transcendent. As the French children's book, The Little Prince, speaks about, with the character of the Little Prince saying, "It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye." So the world we live in tends to value success, money, power, productivity, efficiency. And these aren't bad things, but if they're the only things that we are valuing, then many other good things get forgotten. And these are the more important things, like love, beauty, freedom, joy, friendship. And Marcel gives a very good distinction, actually, when dealing with this kind of technological world that we live in. He doesn't say technology is bad. It's just, if it becomes the only thing that we value, then there's problems. But he makes a distinction actually about how we view the world. And he says, you can either look at things as a problem or as a mystery. And this distinction is helpful. So the problem is something like, mathematical problem, 2 + 2 = 4. And a problem is something that I can see outside of me. It's objective. I can dominate it and conquer it. And it's completely outside of me. It's very controllable. But a mystery, on the other hand, is something that I look on with a different light. And it is outside of me, but it also affects me in a personal way. So a mystery is a reality which transcends this limits of categories of science and math. And so all the things like a beautiful sunset or a beautiful piece of art or an act of friendship, an act of love, these aren't things that you can put into a recipe or a formula. They aren't known in the same way as a problem. It's not a mere object. Rather, this mystery is something that is beyond us, and we have to kind of reverence it and surrender our intellect and not try to conquer and dominate it. The great scientist Albert Einstein actually said it would be possible to describe everything scientifically, which would be like as a problem, but it would make no sense. It would be a description without meaning, as if you described a Beethoven symphony as a variation of wave pressure. So you can, consider a piece of music just as a bunch of notes on a page, or wave variations, or, listening to a beautiful piece of music, especially looking at a beautiful landscape as you hear the music, it brings you to a very beautiful, transcendent place, almost bringing you to heaven. And that's not something that you can put into a mathematical formula. So that's this distinction of seeing with the lens of problem and mystery. And so we can see that most things in life, like family relationships, love, music, beauty, all these realities are not problems. It's more, you can look at them like a problem, but they are more mysteries. And in the sphere of intersubjectivity or intercommunion, interpersonal relationships, this is where Marcel uses this distinction of problem and mystery in a very powerful way. It's like how we treat other persons. And just to give you an example, a story, a few years ago, my friend was living in Spain, and she was actually speaking with a nun, a mother superior in a community of religious sisters there in Spain. And she was hearing that this mother superior was talking about how the members of this community of nuns had some problems with charity and getting along with others. And so one day she was telling one of the sisters who was having a hard time with the other sister, she said, "Are you looking at your sister as a problem or as a mystery?" So I thought that was a great example. I don't know if she actually had ever read the works of Gabriel Marcel. I don't know if she did, but the point is, do we see other people as objects that we can manipulate and control or try to fully understand? And of course, we know the human person and the human heart is very mysterious and deserves our respect and our reverence. So to treat another person like a problem is to degrade her, to treat her as an object. Rather, we want to treat other persons as subjects worthy of love. And losing this sense of transcendence and openness to mystery, the human person in our modern world can suffer from this very functionalized view of the world and of people. Functionalized in the sense of like transactions, like, oh, a person is valuable because they make money or they're successful. But this doesn't fill the deepest longings of our heart, which is, as I was saying at the beginning, to be loved and to be known and to be valued and welcomed for who we are. Even hospitality, the word today is often associated with the industry of hospitality. Like you walk into a fast food restaurant and they work on being friendly and welcoming. Or you could go to a hotel or on a cruise ship, and it's something you would pay to receive, this hospitality, which isn't bad, but it's much more transactional. And it kind of, is based a lot on money and bringing in profit, helping the economic market. But it's not quite getting to this point of our value as human persons. And even though technology is wonderful in many senses, it brings a lot of good. We all know that the more advanced in technology that we've become, especially over the last 20, 30 years with our iPhones and everything, it hasn't really helped us in general become happier or more fulfilled. And there's actually studies that show that in general, people are more lonely, even though we can be connected through the internet or whatever, because we are made for these relationships. We're not made just for transactions. And it can become dehumanizing, this whole emphasis on technology, especially when that becomes the highest thing that we look at and care about instead of the inherent dignity of every person. There's even a great book, a study by Sherry Turkle. Her book is called Alone Together: Why We Expect More from Technology and Less from Each Other. And it's a whole book with a lot of study about how Facebook and other things just actually have caused higher incidences of loneliness and depression and other problems. Maybe there's good things that come, but there's also problems when it becomes the kind of main way that people are dealing with each other. And it's offering supposed substitutes for real connection. So what is the solution or antidote for this situation of the broken world, where people are kind of using each other and there's just not always the emphasis on seeing the value of each person? Well, Gabriel Marcel and I would say that this Metaphysics of Hospitality is a wonderful way to grow in living a new way, living a Christian way, a way of appreciation of each person. And I would say the Metaphysics of Hospitality is a virtue, if you want to understand it like that. It's a virtue. It's an attitude of the heart, an attitude of reverence toward other persons and their very being, and especially for the most vulnerable and unprotected of human beings. So it's a way of treating the other person, respecting their innate dignity and goodness, and it's independent of whether they can produce or achieve or possess anything. And so it's really an aspect of the virtue of charity, the gift of love. Marcel's vision is captured well by another quote from Joseph Pieper, where he says that what the lover gazing upon his beloved says is not, when I love someone, it's not that I'm saying it's so good that you are clever or useful or capable or skillful. Rather, it's good when I love another person, I say it's good that you are. It's good that you exist. To love another person is to say how wonderful it is that you exist. And if we could live in a world that lived like this, it would be amazing. It's living, being able to recognize that every person is a gift, every single person. This dignity and goodness does not apply just to the intelligent or the powerful or the healthy. Even these qualities are not what make us valuable. These gifts and qualities are good, but they don't give us our dignity. Our dignity is innate because we are made in God's image. So this genuine hospitality, the metaphysics of hospitality, applies to all people, especially those who are weakest and most vulnerable. So like a little child, a helpless baby, a homeless person, a person with physical or mental disabilities. And Marcel actually gives, as a description of this attitude of hospitality, the example of a sleeping child. And I just love this image. Just think of a little baby, very helpless, just sleeping, so unprotected. And he says that this kind of shows what we mean by the metaphysics of hospitality, that this child is so unproductive. I mean, it has, in a sense, a useless value on the level of efficiency. It can't do much. It just needs to be taken care of. But at the same time, because there's a dignity and a goodness, because this child is made in God's image and has this wonderful value, there's a sort of duty and a command that helps us know we can respect and take care of this child. And it also reminds us that we are made for connection. We're made for depending on one another, and we're all part of a human family. So in a sense, Marcel says this child is actually invulnerable. It's sacred. This little child deserves to be protected. And so he calls this a mystery. This is not, if you look at the child as a problem, it would look useless. But if you see the child with this lens of mystery, you would see the beauty and the sacredness. And so this kind of points to another aspect, is this knowing that we are interdependent. As human beings, a lot of times we like, especially here in the United States, we really like to emphasize our freedom and our independence. But as human beings, we're also made in God's image, who is a trinity of persons who are dependent, who give themselves to one another. And as human beings, we also are part of a family made to need each other. And that's not a bad thing. And he would say that the sign of a society that's barbaric and very, bad is a society that can't recognize the sacredness and the beauty and the dignity of a sleeping child. And he calls this the sacredness of the unprotected. And this is what is at the root of this attitude of the metaphysics of hospitality. So the metaphysics of hospitality is not a set of practices. It's an attitude of love and respect towards all people. And just as this is a conference on the feminine heart, the women's conference, the hospitality of a feminine heart, we could speak a lot about that. I just want to mention that hospitality obviously is something that all people are called to, and we all want to be loved and welcomed, and we're all called to show that kind of attitude towards others, not just women. But there's a philosopher named Emmanuel Levinas. He was a Jewish French philosopher, and he wrote a lot about hospitality and the need to welcome the other. And he said that the highest expression of the attitude of hospitality was in the French, la femme, meaning the woman. And he wasn't saying that only women are hospitable, but he was saying that there's a kind of feminine principle that is a really universal for humanity, which is to welcome and receive the other. And so he thought there was a particular aspect of femininity, receptivity, in the sense of hospitality. Also, Edith Stein, who Celine mentioned in the introduction, one of my favorite saints, Jewish philosopher who became a Catholic, she discusses the qualities of the feminine heart. And she says that women naturally seek to embrace that which is living, personal, and whole. To cherish, guard, protect, nourish, and advance growth is her natural maternal yearning. So we could say that a woman has a distinct appreciation for this mystery of the other person, because her very person is oriented towards the person, we as women see objects, but we also are very oriented as mothers, as spiritual mothers, as physical mothers, to see the other person and to want to protect and connect with and nourish and cherish. And so this is something that all human beings are called to, but women have a particular strength. Women kind of help us remember, I think, that we are human beings and not human doings. We're called human beings because we, first of all, are who we are. And so the woman has this gift of embracing what is weak and needs nurturing. And in this way, the woman's heart is a heart of hospitality. So in conclusion, hospitality is something that every society has valued, like throughout the history of the world. And it's because it's very much part of what it means to be a human being. Gabriel Marcel's Metaphysics of Hospitality can teach us that this is a truth for all human persons, and it has to do with how we are made with dignity and goodness in our very being, because we're made in God's image and likeness, and God is love. Therefore, we are made for love, to give love and receive love. And this is what hospitality is. We are also members of a common human family. And so this element of interpersonal relationships based on love and welcoming is what brings healing in our larger community. So even though there's a lot of tension and big problems in our world, we can start on a smaller level of the relationships in our lives, trying to be people of peace and forgiveness and welcoming, trying to see other people as gifts. And lastly, as I had mentioned, this hospitality is something that reminds us that we're connected, that we're part of a bigger human family. Pope Benedict the 16th, he wrote this quote: "Humans are dependent. They cannot live except from others and by trust. But there is nothing degrading about dependence when it takes the form of love, because to love someone means saying, I want you to be." Humans are dependent, and that is the primary truth about them, because it is only love can redeem them. So we are made for interpersonal communion because we are made for love. And it's only this love that brings healing to our broken world. At the center of the world's restoration lies a recognition of the dignity of each and every person, beginning with the most vulnerable and fragile of our race. When the hearts of all people can recognize the sacred presence of a sleeping child, then the world will be a better place. So thank you very much. And it was a pleasure and joy to be with you. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Mary. This was so beautiful. I'm very grateful that we have had the joy and the honor of having you express what you have just spent years and years studying in depth and from different angles. And I think this platform of the Metaphysics of Hospitality can help us as women as we look at our own lives and try to find those solid foundations of who we are as women, of who we are as these hospitable, warm, welcoming, nurturing women, as you explained to us, and how we look on the other. I think that some of the words you said we can take to our hearts, to prayer, to examination, and to perhaps a shift in our life that will help us to reach out to the other in a more beautiful, totalizing, and pure way. Something that we're created for, and that our fulfillment lies also very deeply in this reaching out to the other. One of our beautiful art pieces here at Magdala is precisely the one behind me, the encounter, when this woman reaches out to touch the mantle and is healed of her infirmity. And she becomes an example of faith, of trust, that somehow God understands her in her femininity, in her need, in her situation, and that trust is not broken. And this is why if we all reach out with hospitality to each other and within the family, within the community, and across boundaries, as we are here from different faith backgrounds, it is beautiful to know that in our common humanity, there are sufficient bases for us to build a good relationship, a beautiful, kind heart in relation to the other who is different from us. So I would suggest that as you began referring to Mother Teresa of Calcutta and her beautiful Metaphysics of Hospitality in action, as she valued the person not for what they produced, but because they exist as a human person, perhaps we could also, as an exercise, reflect on who in our lives has taught us, like Mother Teresa, to understand that the other has beautiful value. Perhaps our mom, perhaps another person we know, a teacher, who valued the child in the class not because of the beautiful work they produced, but because that they are a person, human person. Maybe we would like to also reflect as a community of women. Sometimes in our groups we have watching us people who belong to a parish group or a Bible study group or just a simple group of friends. And this would be a nice question for us to talk about around the table, to think about how we can show others that their value is not in what they do, but who they are as a human person. Maybe also some of your words will inspire others to bring forth other discussions where we can also, as women, try to improve the quality of our self-awareness and of our interactions and of our outreach to those, especially those in need. So thank you, Mary, and we hope everybody has lots of food for thought after this wonderful presentation. And God bless you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.